Okay. Hi, everyone. We'll get started in just a minute while everyone is making their way into the room. Probably start in about 2 minutes. Last thing. Okay, looks like the numbers have leveled off, so we'll go ahead and get started. So I just wanted to welcome everyone to our Women in Science webinar, where we have 4 fantastic ladies from Sonoma Technology who are going to be talking to us about their careers and the pathways that they took to get to where they're at today. And I hope you'll all enjoy it. If just a little housekeeping, if you have a question that you want to ask our panelists, we'll have time for that at the end. So just use the Q&A button, which should be at the bottom of your screen, and write the question into there, and we'll try to get to everyone's questions at the end of the session. Try not to use the chat, which might also be available. We'll be primarily using the Q&A function. But if you do have any issues or any problems during the webinar, try and use the chat. Our agenda for today will be, we'll do a brief introduction to Kids Making Sense, since this is a Kids Making Sense hosted webinar. We'll go through panelist introductions. We'll go through a series of questions that I have set up for the panelists today, and then we'll open the floor to questions that you all might have to ask our panelists. Sorry about my cat. Okay, so like I said, before we jump into the panel itself, I just want to introduce Kids Making Sense for those of you that may be less familiar with the program. So Kids Making Sense was created and is, well, it's an education program with curriculum and products that teach students how to measure air pollution using air quality sensors, teaches them how to interpret the data that they collect, and also how to take action to reduce emissions and exposure to air pollution. And Kids Making Sense was created by a company called Sonoma Technology, which is where all of our panelists are going to be, they all work. That's also where I work, and we'll all be talking about our experiences there. But the program was created and is being run by this experienced team of air quality and atmospheric scientists from Sonoma Technology. And so those are the people that you're going to hear from today. They're really passionate about air pollution, meteorology, and climate change, and so are a real source of information. So you can ask as many questions as you want about their career path or what it is that they do, how they got interested in science, all these sorts of things. And so with that, we'll go ahead and introduce the panelists. And so the first panelist that we have today is Hillary Hafner. Hillary, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, I'm Hillary, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer right now at Sonoma Technology. But I started 32 years ago at this company, and I started out as a data analyst and have grown my career to where I am now. Along the way, managed both data analysis and measurement departments. So a pretty broad experience, and I've been here a long time because I love it. I really like working with the people we have and the kinds of projects that we have. I've gotten to travel the world and just really enjoy air pollution work and helping people solve their problems.
Fantastic. Our next panelist today is Tammy Levetza. Tammy, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, I'm Tammy Levetso. I am a VP and senior scientist at Sonoma Technology. I've been with the company since 1996. I'll let you all in the audience do that math. Been here a long time because I also love it. I studied chemistry in college. I also have a master's in business. I have done all kinds of work in air quality, everything from analyzing hydrocarbons in the air to helping run our Kids Making Sense program. I do a lot of work studying fire and smoke impacts, and I'm happy to be here to chat with you today.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tammy. Our next panelist is Lynn Alley. Lynn, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Lynn. I work at Sonoma Tech with everyone here who you're meeting. I'm an atmospheric scientist at Sonoma Tech, and I've been with the company for about 6 years. But I've been doing air quality work for, oh gosh, about 13 or 14 years now. And my background is in meteorology and math, actually. And my specialty is modeling air pollution to see where the pollution travels and where it's coming from and the health impacts from that pollution. So I'm happy to be here and meet you all.
Thanks so much, Lynn. And then our last panelist today, last but not least, is Crystal McClure. Crystal, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Crystal. I'm really happy to be here today and talk with everyone and answer your questions. I'm an atmospheric scientist at Sonoma Technology. I'm the newest person here. I've only been at Sonoma Tech for 2 years, but I have been in the atmospheric science and air quality community for over 10 years now, since I started on my bachelor's. And ended with my PhD in atmospheric chemistry. Started out in meteorology and realized that I really wanted to get into the air quality part of environmental science. And at Sonoma Tech, I have a really cool job where I can study wildfires, I can code, I can make programs, I can do measurements of air quality and make sure that people are following regulations. And it's a ton of fun. Happy to be here.
Fantastic. And then I'm the moderator. I'm Olivia. I've also been at Sonoma Tech for 2 years. I'm an atmospheric scientist in the same department as Crystal and Tammy and Lynn. And I'm also the Kids Making Sense lead scientist as well. So I'll be the one asking the questions. All right. So thanks so much, everyone. So we'll jump right into the questions that we have for the panelists. And so the first one is, when did you know you were interested in the environment or air quality or just science in general? And did you have a role model that really played a part in you discovering that you were interested in one of these topics? And so we'll go ahead and maybe we'll start with Hillary, if you want to tackle that question first.
Sure, my pleasure. It's funny, I don't have like a specific incident, but I just remember always loving math and science. And my father was an engineer, so it sort of drove me towards engineering. And I liked chemistry so much that chemical engineering became where I landed. And I wasn't specifically thinking about the environment until after working at an oil company on air pollution issues. I decided to go to grad school and to focus on air, but from the other side of, sort of the fence of industries, is to basically figure out how to clean up the air, not figure out how much pollution I was permitted to be able to emit, right? And so I would say, as far as a role model, both my father and then my professor in graduate school. My professor was a very demanding man. He was super smart. The thing I admired so much about him was that he developed really simple but elegant solutions to problems. It just made me think in a different way, like not overcomplicating things. And he engaged all of us with other researchers from all over the world. So it just gave a global perspective, and it was just very inspiring. And so, after working there, then I came to work for, after I finished my graduate degree, I came to work at STI. So it's just, you know, and it was perfect. It was just exactly what I was ready for.
Fantastic. Tammy, would you like to tell us about your experience next?
Sure, and I apologize ahead of time. My dog's been barking, but since I was a young kid, I've always been interested in just the outdoors in general. I grew up for part of my life at the beach, and the second part of my life in the mountains, and now I live in the Bay Area. And I just always found being outside so wonderful. I didn't know that I wanted to be an environmental scientist until I went to college, and I sort of dabbled a little bit in biology. I thought I wanted to be a doctor at one point. I had a professor who encouraged me to study chemistry because she said, you could either be a doctor or you could go into biochemistry, pharmaceutical, environmental science. You could still go to medical school. So I ended up changing my major in chemistry, which was probably the best thing I ever did. And actually, the way that I got the job at Sonoma Technology was sort of by accident. I was having lunch with a friend one day, and I was sort of complaining about the job that I had at the time. And he said, well, there's a position opening up at Sonoma Technology. You should apply. And I said, well, I don't know anything about air quality, but I do know something about chemistry. So I applied and I got the job, and I've been there ever since. And very happy. That was a great move.
Fantastic. Lynn, how about you?
Yeah, I think I am very similar to Tammy and Hillary, and I'm finding a theme that I was also interested in the environment at a very young age. And I grew up in Lincoln, Nebraska, actually, in the middle of the country, where there are very severe storms and tornadoes and flooding and blizzards. And so weather was just a way of life, and we all had to deal with it on a seasonal basis. And I was just fascinated by it, and I would just, sit out the window a lot of times and just like see what the sky was doing. And then I'd go run to the computer to see what that was saying. And then I run to the TV screen to see what the news was saying. And so I was just exhilarated, I think, by the weather. And so, I think that was just a natural progression for me to go into a field where I could study it and be in it every day. And so it's just, kind of a dream job for me to kind of get into the air quality field. And I eventually did that when I took a air quality course in college. But, I watched documentaries, like Planet Earth, like I'm sure a lot of you guys also love to watch those kind of documentaries, and anything narrated by David Attenborough and things like that. I think it's just so easy to just be fascinated by the earth and want to be involved and protect it as best we can. So.
That's great. Crystal, are you similar on this theme?
I don't know if I was sure that I wanted to go into environmental science at a very early age, but I know towards the end of high school, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do in college / with my life. It's a very difficult time for everyone, I know. But there was an elective class that I could take, and it was called GMO, and not genetically modified organisms. It was geology, meteorology, and oceanography. And you got to kind of dabble in each one of those subjects for a while. And the meteorology part was just, I fell in love immediately when we got to go outside and measure the temperature and dew point and relative humidity by using a sling psychrometer. I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do. And then finally, when I got into college and actually made meteorology my major, I had a really good air quality professor, and he was basically my role model. He's like the smartest person I had ever met in my life, but he always made me feel like I could be, I am that smart and I can do what he did. And so just a lot of that encouragement helped me know that this was the place I wanted to be.
Fantastic. That's awesome. Very similar sort of time when everyone sort of decided that they were interested in pursuing this. And it is really interesting to hear that everyone was initially really fascinated with the outdoors. Definitely a common theme there. So our next question is, so what was your, and I know you've touched on this a little bit, but maybe if you could give us a little bit more details, what was your career path to where you're at today? Yeah, so what led you to the position that you're in today? Hillary, would you like to take that one?
Sure. I've played a lot of roles. So as I mentioned, at Sonoma Tech, I started out as a data analyst, and with the emphasis on air pollution. I mean, that's what I studied in grad school, and I slowly, over time, the first few years, you start building clients and then winning projects on your own, and then you need staff to help you get those projects done. So you hire somebody to manage, and then you take on project management, and and you get career growth through all of that. And at the time, it was a very small company, so you did have to kind of wear all the hats. You had to kind of be able to do everything. And then that, if you think about it, chief operating officer, I have to kind of do a little bit of everything. And so it really led to the role that I have now. The nice thing about working for our company is that I still get to do science. Not as much of it maybe as I would like, but I still get to do the science, and work with everyone on, as a principal investigator, senior advisor, technical writer. So I still get to do that part that's fun as well.
Great. Tammy, how did you end it?
Sure. So similar to Hillary, I think when I first started at STI, I was hired as a very, entry data analyst. And I think the first project I ever worked on at STI was with Hillary. We were analyzing hydrocarbon data that was being collected from around the country. And boy, I did a lot of that. And then I remember the second project I worked on had to do with estimating emissions from different types of pollution sources. So we were trying to figure out how much pollution is coming from cars versus cows versus orange trees. You wouldn't think that orange trees are sources of pollution, but they are. And so, from there, I got really interested in using software to display information. And, back then, as you can imagine, graphical technology wasn't that sophisticated. And so I remember getting really excited about being able to make maps to show the data that we were producing. And back in those days, mapping software was really expensive, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I really pushed that. And I think I was one of the first people to bring map technology to the company, and that was very exciting. And so we actually grew a whole, we called it the Geographic Information Systems Department. And we made all the maps for all the different science projects that were going on in the company. And that was a lot of fun. From there, I got interested in software development. And I was at a point in my career where I was starting to manage small projects and, contribute technically to those and think about ways that we could use technology to display information in ways that people could understand better. And that was really interesting to me. Did that for a while. Decided at some point that through one of the software projects that I was working on, I became very interested in fire. And how do we manage vegetation to prevent catastrophic fires from happening? And that was a fun path that I went down for a while. Now I work on a lot of environmental legal cases, and that's also fun and interesting. And it uses the skill set that I love, which is how do you present really complicated information to a judge and a jury? And so I would just, I've had a long and winding career path at Sonoma Tech. But the one thing that's wonderful about the company is if you have a good idea and the desire and motivation, the company is very supportive of, fostering that and encouraging you to really develop your career.
Great. Lynn?
Yeah, I think I was mentioning that in college I studied meteorology, much like Crystal, and I took one class my junior year of college in air quality, and that was actually in the same building as the meteorology department, but it was over in the engineering department. And my roommate was a civil engineer, and he encouraged me to take this class with, a professor from Germany on air quality and meteorology and how those two things fuse together. So, where does wind blow, the air pollution plume, how far does it go? How does it disperse? How does it, interplay with different sources that are, industrial sources, for example. And so I've always been a modeler, actually, in the last 10 years. And I started with a indoor air quality model when I was in college with this professor. And I just kind of grew out of that when I started my career after college. And then, I'm a lot like Tammy. I'm a very visual person, and I like to visualize where the pollution goes and, how it's affecting people. And yeah, so that's been my career path for the past 10 years or so.
Great, thanks, Lynn. Crystal?
Yeah, I was mentioning the professor that I had in college that taught air quality, and I think after that class, I was on a very academia or, college path for the longest time. I did the whole grad school, PhD, postdoc route for the longest time, and that was a ton of fun. I learned so much. When I was finishing my bachelor's, I was able to determine how particles are take measurements to determine how particles are getting created in the atmosphere. And then in grad school, I got to measure mercury and how it was getting transported across the Pacific Ocean from Asia to the United States. That's really fun. And then finally, my last couple of projects was on wildfires in the Western US, which affects a lot of us. And it's kind of a hot topic right now. But as I was going along that path, I realized, even though the advances that you're making are really, really important in academia and that college space, it's less applied. And I really wanted to apply my science, and feel like I'm being more hands-on with what I'm doing is really affecting or helping people day to day. So that's why I decided to kind of switch gears and go into a more consulting route with Sonoma Tech and I still get to study wildfires, still get to take measurements of pollutants, and I still get to make programs and code and all that stuff. So it's been kind of a windy route, but I think I'm where I'm supposed to be in the applied science arena.
Fantastic. And so our next question is, and some of you have talked about being data analysts and atmospheric scientists, but what does that maybe to students or to people who maybe don't have an idea of what that entails? Maybe you could just touch on what your typical day is like. What is the type of work that you do? Well, maybe Lynn, do you want to take that one first? We'll go in a different order this time.
Sure. My typical day lately has really been starting pretty early in the morning and checking my meeting calendar. And I have a lot of Zoom meetings lately, which is fun. And it's a good way to try and interact and keep in touch with project teams. And, then I kind of sit down and really try and organize my daily schedule. I need to think about all the project deadlines that are coming up and what needs my attention that day and how am I going to allocate my time. And so that, that takes up, some of my morning, and then, going through emails and things like that. But, then I really get into into the weeds, and I start looking into a lot of modeling data, a lot of numbers, a lot of graphics, and pretty pictures with lots of colors, and trying to interpret. It's not just looking at the model, but it's also trying to interpret what is the model telling you, or me, or Tammy, who I might be trying to talk to her about these results on a project, for example. And do those results make sense? So a lot of my days are looking at models, model output, and trying to kind of solve a real world problem for maybe a power plant, or maybe somebody who owns a whole fleet of buses or trucks or something like that, and they want to clean up their fleet, and they want to buy cleaner trucks or something like that. They need some numbers to say, okay, how many do I need, and by what time. So yeah, that's an example of what my day might look like.
That's great. Hillary, do you want to go next? Yours will probably be quite different, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it is and it isn't, right? Like, I think we all attend a lot of meetings because we're going to have both internal meetings and our client meetings, right? And the client meetings are usually either trying to talk about the project that we're working on with them and the status of it, or we might be trying to talk to a past client because we want to do more work with them. Then I think we all do problem solving. So mine might be from a corporate perspective, all the way to a project where it's like, hey, we ran into this problem or this issue, or we don't understand what the data is saying. Again, it kind of comes down to coming up with the right approach and working as a team to sort of figure out what we're going to do about it. We certainly do lots of brainstorming. You were talking, Lynn and Tam, about being very visual. I am too, and I love the creative side of what we can do. For example, really cool graphics that tell a story. A presentation to a client that isn't as technical as we are. How do you make that clear? How do you make it interesting? And then also there's going to be days where I'm doing so when I'm on that, then I'm also working. We have a graphic designer, and coming up with, for example, really cool one-page infographic on something. And then I'll also have time where we're trying to figure out how to mentor someone. Like I'll do mentoring and one-on-ones with staff from a technical and a person and a professional perspective. And then I also almost every day do some sort of writing and also some sort of technical review of a proposal or a project deliverable to make sure that it's technically correct. And so I have a lot on my plate, but I think we all do some of the same things.
That's true. Crystal, do you want to take that next?
Sure. My typical day looks like meeting with clients who I really love the clients that I work with. They're really passionate about their projects and the things that they're looking for. And also getting to meet and collaborate with the really smart people that work here. And beyond that, it's a lot of data analysis and problem solving. We need to find out why this particular pollutant or why smoke was in this area, and we need to do trajectory, or we need to figure out how it got from fire to this area where people live, or we need to create a program that can model that kind of that transport from fire to people, or try and figure out the health effects on people when they're breathing in that smoke. So my typical day is a lot of problem solving, and I would recount them as like brain teasers. Every single day you get to do a couple of brain teasers, which I always found really fun. But that's one of my favorite parts. And yeah, getting to work with really smart people and basically learning every single day.
Great. Tammy, do you have a different day?
Similar, but maybe slightly different. You know, as Hillary said, we wear a lot of different hats. My project manager hat day involves keeping track of the 7 to 8 or 10 different projects that I'm managing or involved with, figuring out where my help is needed on those. Again, as Crystal said, you know, doing a lot of problem solving. You know, what science question are we trying to answer? What's the right, you know, information and tools to arrive at the answer, reviewing the answer, and then if it makes sense, great. If it doesn't, uh-oh, now what? You know, what do we need more tools? Do we need more data? Do we not have enough data to answer the question? You know, those types of sort of, that's kind of the day-to-day science world for me. On the legal projects that I work on, those are interesting. I'm actually working on one right now with Lynn. That's very complex, very challenging. It's taking up a lot of our time right now. But I like those projects because we really have to take the scientific information, digest it down for our clients who are attorneys, they're not scientists, and then be able to present that in really meaningful ways. And so that's the real challenge for me on those projects. And I'm also pretty heavily involved in a business and a corporate way with the company in helping to develop new business opportunities. And so I spend a fair amount of time day to day on calls with prospective new clients, presenting work that we've done for another client that a new client might be interested in, and working with other STI staff to help them develop business. And so that's another big chunk of my time.
Great. Everyone sounds very busy on a variety of different tasks. So I'm going to skip to this question because this might be interesting for some of the people who have tuned in. So what advice do you have for students who might be interested in this field, or for teachers who have students that might be interested in this field? What would your advice be to them to sort of pursue their interests, or, you know, end up in a position similar to the one that you have? Hillary, do you want to take that first?
Sure. It's interesting. I was thinking about this just even from the perspective of, I have a 7-year-old granddaughter, and she is so interested in science and experiments, and, you know, and basically it's encouraging that, right? It's encouraging exploration and questions, and, you know, just sort of looking at things from a science, you know, a science eye, and, you know, having that language. You know, it's been very enjoyable to sort of see it at, you know, at a first grade level, right? You know, she is really, really interested in, and also then the hands-on thing. So anything to do with, you know, so again, we've been doing some experiments here, you know, the kind of common ones, but I just being involved and touching things, and, you know, and we grew crystals last week, and I took pictures every day for her and sent it to her. You know, I think that is to me one of the most important things, is that engagement, and then the, you know, the actual doing something with your hands and seeing a result. And even if it didn't meet your hypothesis, you know, because my granddaughter will come up with a hypothesis, and then we'll see if it met it or not. And, you know, and I will throw something in as a different kind of control. And, you know, it's been really cool to sort of see that process start so young. And I think she'll always be passionate about doing, you know, doing the hands-on kind of thing. So
That's fantastic.
That's the main thing I have. Yep.
Very encouraging. Tammy, do you want to take a stab at this one?
Sure. I would say, you know, if you love science and math, but you don't know exactly what you want to do, don't worry about it. Just go for it. You know, explore biology, explore chemistry. I wasn't a big fan of math until I really started liking science, and I realized, oh, I have to learn a lot of math if I'm going to do this as a career. So now I love math. But yeah, I would say, you know, don't be afraid to try different things along the way.
Perfect. Lynn?
Yeah, I think, obviously it's always good for someone to have a lot of interest in math and science, and that's a given for sure. But I also think that, you kind of have to have the mindset of like wanting to be a problem solver, kind of like we've all been talking about, and liking to put together kind of puzzles and different pieces of things, and see kind of the big picture once you put all those details together. And I think, as you get older, it gets, you can add in a little bit more complexities. But I think, what was useful for me when I was a kid was I was really into reading. And I just like to read about things. And I really try to like always work on my reading comprehension. What could I remember about a story that I read, months ago? And it didn't have to be about science. It could be, something from my literature class or something like that. And that's really helped me a lot in just project work, recalling things and what was important in telling a story, I think is really, really beneficial in the scientific field. And just writing and communication skills is really helpful in this field.
Great, that's great. Crystal?
Yeah, for students, I would say, there are a lot of science mentorship groups out there. It would be really good to get involved or just look up one that's nearby, or there are even some that are online, and you can, do projects with a mentor online or in person and just learn a little bit more about science or the particular area that you're interested in, whether it be environmental science or biology or, whatever. And there's a lot of resources out there and a lot of things to take advantage of. And then also for students, don't ever let anyone tell you you're not good at something. You are and can be good at whatever you want to be. I know that as girls, as women, we tend to hear that we're not good at math or things like that, and that's just flat out not true. So always believe in yourself, and that will take you a really long way. For teachers, all those hands-on projects, those are fantastic. And I know they were my favorite thing and really got me involved in learning the science. So you guys do a great job pretty much all the time. But any extra of those hands-on projects, those are fantastic for really inquisitive minds.
Awesome. That's great advice from many different directions there. So that's a lot of good material for people to go on. And then we have one more question, and then we'll open it up to audience questions. Hillary, I think I'm going to ask you this one. So is this career area typically dominated by women or men? And if it is, why do you think that might be the case? And what sort of advice would you give to somebody who identifies differently than, the traditional dominant group?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. So I'm a chemical engineer, and when I was in school a long time ago, it was dominated by men, because engineering in general was dominated by men. And I remember, for example, in a mechanical engineering class, that I asked a question. The example was talking about camshafts that rotate and have whatever it is inside the car. I don't even know what a camshaft is. And so I raised my hand and asked, what is a camshaft? Because you needed to be able to envision what they were talking about to be able to get the math right? And I knew the only girl in the class would ask that question or something. And the guy next to me, he's like, I didn't know it either. I'm like, then why didn't you ask the question? So, I wasn't intimidated by that, but that can be intimidating, as a young woman to be in something like that. I think traditionally engineering was a man's world, because, as Crystal noted, young women were often told, oh, you can't be good at math. You're not going to be good at science. I'm sorry to hear that it's still being stated out there a little bit, but that's partly it. One of my good friends in college was just as great in math and she was doing accounting because she had been told in high school that women didn't go into engineering. You know, she probably made a lot more money than I did, having been an accountant. But anyway, I think that it's really, really, you know, just stick to your guns and move forward. You know, it's really important to do what brings you joy and that you know that you can excel at. And I did want to say one thing that when I worked for the oil company, I experienced the first time in my life prejudice towards being a female, and that there was an unwritten kind of rule about what you had to wear. You know, you needed to wear hose and high heels and, you know, and a skirt and top. And it's like the guys were wearing jeans, you know, and it was just the weird, like, and the men would comment on you. And I hope that's not happening anymore at that company. But that's one of the reasons I left, was that women were being passed over for jobs because, you know, for a guy. There was a lot of that going on, and I hope it's not happening as much, or at least we're bringing it out so that we can talk about it. And I have not experienced that since that company. You know, thank goodness. And then I should say that our company, are we more than 50% women? I mean, women, we have a look at, you're talking to these great, you know, women scientists here. We have a really diverse team in that way. Like, it's not dominated by you know, by women or men. We definitely, it's pretty amazing how rich, you know, we have of the kinds of people and the kinds of backgrounds that we have. So that's another reason why I've stayed at STI for so long.
That's fantastic advice. I know I'm not on the panel, but I'm going to weigh in too. I was told, so I grew up in England and I went to school in England. And in secondary school, you get put into different groups based on how proficient you are at math, English, and science. And I was put into the almost bottom group for math because I took the math proficiency test when I had the flu, which is not a great time to take a math test. And I was able to do the homework from somebody who was in the top group. And I showed my mom, and she could see that I was capable, and she told the teacher, and the teacher said, no, there's no way that Olivia could do that. There's no way that she's good enough to be able to do the top group's work. And so that has stuck with me all these years. I obviously no longer live in England, and this has stuck with me and sort of fueled me to prove that person wrong. So I'd also advise people to, you know, if you do receive criticism, you know, unfair criticism, you can use that as fuel inside to sort of, you know, prove that person wrong. That's great advice as well, Hillary. That's really interesting experience to hear about. So I think at this point, we're going to open the floor to questions, and we have Bryant here as well, and he's been diligently monitoring our Q&A section. So Bryant, I don't know if there's any questions that people might have from the audience, or if you have any now, feel free to type those in and we will go ahead and present them to the panel. We'll give people a minute to sort of.
I'll ask a question of this group. So how did all of you get, like Olivia just mentioned, oh, she couldn't do that. You know, I don't think I ever heard that in when I was growing up, but Lynn, Crystal, Tammy, did you guys ever get discouraged from, you know, taking the path that you were taking?
Yeah, I mean, I originally tested for like the gifted and talented like GT program when I was in kindergarten or something, and I didn't pass the test. And my mom really fought for me and was like, she needs to be in this program. And they let me in anyway, but I did hear along the way, like, you're not very good at this, or we don't think you're very good at this. But I just kind of, like Olivia, I kind of use that as fuel. Like, I know I can do this, and I know that I can do better, and I can be at the top in the gifted and talented if I really want to. So yeah, I think, I know I've still heard it. So
I had an experience when I went to college orientation right before I got my bachelor's degree. You know, before my freshman year of college, you're assigned a counselor and your parents, and you go to this counselor and you discuss what your major is going to be. And, you know, I wanted to be in the meteorology program, and I was trying to get a scholarship to go because I was going out of state. And the counselor, you know, just flat out looked at my parents and not at me. It was almost like I wasn't there. And she said to them, well, you know, the meteorology program is one of the hardest programs at the school, and about 60% of the students drop out within the first year, or they flunk out. And, you know, at first I was just like, and it wasn't necessarily about, you know, females or males. It was about all students at first. But then she said, well, and most of those students are the females. And I remember, you know, having a similar fire in my belly that, you know, that Crystal just described and Olivia just described, just saying, okay, well, she doesn't know me, and she doesn't know what my passion is and how much I really love this field. And she's not even looking at my grades from high school and like how I've taken all the prerequisites to get into this program. She's just saying, you know, something that she's seen for, you know, the general kids that have applied to this program. That's not who I am. So I, you know, that's one time that I felt a little bit discouraged, but it actually probably made me a little bit more successful in the long run.
I don't think I've actually had a situation where I felt discriminated against. I did have one really terrible algebra teacher in high school who really hated the fact that I would miss 6 periods sometimes because I also played sports. And he was convinced that you couldn't possibly be an athlete and like and be good at math at the same time. And I just remember that being a challenging year in school for me, because I always felt this, you know, sort of tug of war between missing that class and playing sports. But I don't recall a time when I felt discriminated because I was a woman, just because I played sports, which is weird.
Yeah, that's really strange. I mean, you end up getting that fire in your belly, and you show people exactly what you can do. I know that people told me I wasn't very good at math, and then I joined the math team and got first, second, third place at pretty much every single competition I went to. So yeah, when people tell you you're not good at something or you can't be good at something, they're completely wrong.
Awesome. Well, hopefully the movements that are taking place now, sort of in the country and across the globe with equality and, you know, being more aware of the inequalities that exist, will help to sort of rectify some of these situations that may have been occurring. So I'm looking at the chat and there's no questions. So I'll give you guys one more minute. And if there's any questions you can ask, you know, it could be anything, science, not science. Oh, there we go. Okay, awesome. So somebody is asking, so many of you have talked about having multiple parts to your job. Is there something interesting you do, science related or not, that people are surprised is part of your position? Anyone can take this.
The surprised part is hard.
Yeah.
Maybe something that,
That's a good question, actually.
I would say one would be, I'll mention to people that, you know, I have projects in Africa and China and, you know, other, you know, and multiple other countries, and just sort of like, oh, you guys do work outside of the United States. And I thought, you know, so that might be a thing. And the fact that getting to go to visit some of these places, at least before COVID, has been one of the more exciting parts of my career, for sure. Maybe not a surprise, but you know, it's not common.
Yeah, like I get to do measurements and coding and project management, and get to do kind of everything. You don't just have to be taking measurements and doing data analysis. You can also create programs and do computer science and modeling. And that's one of the nice things, is you kind of get to do everything.
Yeah, I would add, maybe not surprising, but before COVID times and Zoom, a lot of people in our company have the opportunity to go to conferences and give presentations about the science that they're working on. Sometimes as an attendee, sometimes as an invited speaker, but those are really fun. And it gives you an opportunity to sort of go to new places and see new cities. And so I think that's something that's maybe a little bit unique.
And that we're missing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I miss it. I think one thing I was surprised about when I started in, my career was that I got to work with people from all over the world. And that you get to know, people's cultures and how they think, and they might think differently than you because they have a different educational background and different, language, that English might not be their first language. And that's actually really, really interesting, and it helps develop really robust teams, and brainstorming is really fun and interesting, and jokes kind of form. And I really enjoy working with people from all different cultures and from all over the world. And that was just kind of a extra thing that I wasn't expecting.
I think
Yeah.
something else. Oh, go ahead, Crystal.
Oh, I was going to say, Lynn brings up a good point. There are a lot of opportunities for students out there, fellowship wise, where you can sign up or, write a report and try to get in a lottery for going to France to study blah over the summer, even for like middle school, junior high, high school. Those things are out there. So go to another country and experience what they're working on and their ideas, and it builds collaboration and spans your horizons.
I think something else that people might be interested or surprised by is that while we're all scientists, we don't work in a lab setting. There's no traditional lab that we go into necessarily. We work with the data that comes from measurements that are taken. So that's something that maybe younger students would be surprised by, that you can be a scientist, but you don't have to work in a lab. You get to go outside and, you can set up instrumentation, and there's a lot more to being a scientist than just being in a lab. We have another question here. So Brittany's asking, as far as air quality goes, have any of you been involved in a new field of oh man, I think my answer is going to be no. Pyroaerobiology, the study of aerosolization and transport of microbes in wildfire smoke.
That sounds like a question for Tammy or Crystal.
I have not. Sounds really cool. Something that I'm going to have to look up afterwards. But that's a really interesting point. There have been plenty of studies that show that microbes can make it all the way across the Pacific, from Asia to the Western US. So seeing how those big smoke clouds and pyrocumulus clouds can actually transport biology, microbes far downwind, that's a really cool new field. I'll have to look into that.
Emmy, any experience?
Yeah, I have not been involved in that type of work. Generally, when we're looking at smoke, sorry, my dog. When we're looking at smoke from fires, we're studying particulate matter, particles that are impacting humans, and the health effects of those. I personally, the work that I do related to fire has to do with pre-fire planning and what can you do before a fire occurs to prepare yourself and make your community more resilient. So no, I haven't done that.
my previous life, I used to work on projects where we would look at microbes that were getting out of the ocean and being ejected into the air through sea spray. But I don't have any experience with the wildfire smoke, but that's, like Crystal said, a really interesting area. Definitely sounds new. I haven't heard of that before. I'm sure we're all going to look it up after this.
Yeah, we are.
Thank you for that question, Brittany.
Yeah.
All right, we're coming up on the end here. If anyone has any last minute burning questions, go ahead and type them into the chat or into the Q&A section rather. Otherwise, we can, okay, there's no more open questions it seems, so that's good. If anyone has any questions, you can always contact us. Our emails are easily accessible on the Sonoma Technology website, or you can email Kids Making Sense and we can, get you in contact with the right person. And I'll just close with this final slide, if it goes to the final slide. So Kids Making Sense is on social media. So if you're interested in finding out more about the program or about how you might be able to use it in your classroom, you can follow any one of our, any one of our social media accounts. So you could go to the website directly, kidsmakingsense.org. You can contact us and ask us any questions, and we'd be happy to help you or to, see how we can work with you on getting Kids Making Sense in your school. And with that, I will thank all of our panelists so much for taking the time to be with us and sharing their experiences. It has been a pleasure. Learning a little bit more about everyone. I work with you all, but learning more about everyone's experiences, which is not something we typically talk about.
Yeah.
I hope everyone in the audience has had a chance to learn as well from your experiences. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. I'll go ahead.
Thank you, Olivia.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.